everyone. Welcome to episode 311 from Ken's office. This is Whole Life, and where better? This is the first podcast that we have taped in-house, since before the pandemic, which means that was, it was primetime Andy still, and that was, 2.5 years ago? Something like that, since Philip's office used to be a little electrical spool with a couple of microphones hanging out of the center that Randy built to be able to keep us mobile. But it's been a long time. So here we are in Ken's beautiful renovated office. It's almost like you had an interior designer, Ken. Is that true?
I had the best. If you don't know, I had a fantastic interior designer.
Yeah,
the best.
That's what I heard. I heard you did.
That's exactly. I searched until I found the best in the country, and
she lives so close.
It was amazing. It worked out really well.
Yeah. Who knew she was a member?
Who knew she was married to you?
Well, I did, I guess, but that was just me. So, no. So today we're planning on a 2-hour podcast. So settle in, grab your favorite drink, and maybe a pillow, because I'm looking.
You may be on your own for that one.
I'm feeling comfortable. I'm in this great chair that swivels.
Yeah.
And
I took a picture of you in it so that people could appreciate it later. I'll send you the picture so
Jeff
you can put it.
And Jeff got the corner seat on the couch.
I got the couch. I may lay down if it's 2 hours.
You may lay down if it's 2 hours. If it's 2 hours, Jeff, you'll be gone after about 45 minutes.
Exactly.
Let's just be honest.
So Jeff gets the comfortable seat in the house. So Jeff, really quickly, tell us how fantastic was your vacation?
Well, I want to tell you, it was fantastic. And anybody gets a chance to go to Sicily, make sure that you go with a loose belt, because the food is incredible. It's really
You're not
good.
biased though about
Not at
Sicily.
all.
No,
Not at all.
no.
Yeah.
No, you don't look any worse to wear. You look real good.
Because we had to do a ton of walking. You got to walk everywhere. We drove down a street that literally our car did not fit.
Oh no.
Yeah, I unfortunately. No, the car literally would not fit down that street. And
it was a Fiat 300.
It was
right?
It was a smaller car too. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it was a good trip. We had a great time, and my wife found an old cousin that she never knew that she had there. So.
Your wife has family there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she found it. This was in the main part of Italy, not in Sicily. There's a little town called Valle d'Angelo, and we were walking out of the town, and the guy said, he says some kind of, I think he said just good morning in English. We said, "You speak English? Could you please tell us?" And he found out. He says, "Yeah." He says, "I know my wife's name," and come to find out, he's a long lost cousin. So it's actually.
How does that happen?
Seriously,
Who does that happen to?
In Nowheresville, Italy, and just happened to run into a guy that's your relative, huh?
Well, we were exploring this town because we knew that there was some ancestry there.
Okay.
And come to find out, there's only 3 names of families in this town, and that happened to be one of them. He was more than happy to. So we bought come to find out, he's a farmer. We bought some of his olive oil and some of his honey.
Oh, man.
It's really good. Yeah. Nice.
All right, so it is pasta at the Cinco Mani's.
Yeah,
Friday night?
Over.
Or was it come on over? Yeah, test out that. I want to test out that olive oil.
Yeah,
that's what I really want. All right, well, no,
it's
we
good
did.
to be back.
We did. There was last week. We were just like, man, sure would be nice if Jeff was here to answer this question and give us a little more insight on this one. And
I'm sure you did fine.
But before I forget, I got to tell this story, because last week I invited anyone that was listening, come by in the lobby and give me a hug. I'm available usually pretty much every Saturday morning. I'm out in the lobby running a camera or just talking and conversing. And this week I got my hug. Man, I got my hug before Stanley went on for the second time in first service. So I got that one out of the way quick. The second one was from someone I've never met before. And
so you're in the lobby just asking for hugs? Is that
it was just like, in case you need you need to have a better week. I mean, maybe the hug isn't the best thing you could get, a Randy hug, but it might be better than nothing. So that was the premise we were working on. And Will and Robert Vargas were down on the south side. They were greeting, and they opened the doors, and this younger gentleman who was with his girlfriend, and I looked at him, he looked at me, he looked at her, and then said, this is Randy, the podcast guy with the glorious hair. And I'm like, the glorious hair. And he's like, and he did, yep. And I was like, well, now I feel pretty good. I was going to get a haircut, but maybe not. I mean, if you cut it, is it still glorious? I don't know. So they were late. So we didn't really have a chance to converse much, but thanks for the compliment, and come and get your hug next week. I'll still be here. Randy was the glorious hair. So I'm thinking about whenever it is we start signing autographs, I think that's what it's going to have to be, the podcast guy with the glorious hair, right? I mean,
yeah, that's not short at all. That won't take long for you to sign autographs with that.
Well, when you only sign one, it won't take that. It's not that big a deal, really.
Yeah, but you're about to blow up.
Oh, is that what it is? I hope not. But anyway, this week we were in Commandment 8. Right. This is 9 weeks. Because we haven't skipped any now, right? We're all back together. Correct. So it's 9 weeks, eight commitments. We're not going to say. I'm not even going to say commandments anymore. I'm just going to say commitments.
Okay.
We've been talking about Zed while you were gone.
Yeah, he actually gave a talk on the 10 Commandments for a church retreat one time and called them the Commitments. So I was going to say, is this from Zed?
Yeah, and he was on the podcast. I still can't find that episode. I have dug, and it's like, man, I really wish I'd have put his name in the show notes, and maybe I did, but I'm searching and it's not finding it. So I've been slowly but surely going through one at a time. So I'm not there yet, but I will post it eventually. All right. So we're in 8, which is thou shalt not steal. And I don't know, 6 and 8 seem a lot the same the way we've broken them down. Is there a difference? Do we need to? Can we convert 2 to 1? Just kind of roll it all together with the Ken Wetmore paraphrase of the 2 and just have 9? Is that a possibility? No? Yeah, I mean, well, because can you, if you steal or withhold, it's kind of like killing, right? Can you steal or withhold enough to kill? Because that's kind of what we talked about in killing.
I was actually thinking as I was preparing that there are a lot of similarities, and yet murder is the taking of a life. It's actually taking maybe the most precious possession without permission. So I think God probably felt like it was a good thing just to clarify that. Clarify that one.
The thing that hit me the most about this, I think you made about 3 attempts. Like, all right, we're gonna take Merriam-Webster and we're gonna give a definition, and you're like, you're probably thinking to yourself, yeah, I know that already. Yeah. And then you went Strong's Concordance and you said, yeah, but Ken, we already know that. So now we can move on. You're like, no, because here's Ken's definition. No, So, of course we were waiting from that. And take or wrongly withhold something that benefited or would have benefited another without their permission or through deceit. That makes it, again.
You're actually reading reading the second one, the Strong's Concordance one.
This says Ken's definition. Strong's Concordance definition of the Hebrew word for you steal is to thieve, literally or figuratively by implication, to deceive, carry away, indeed secretly bring, steal away, get by stealth. Is that a typo in the?
Maybe there's a typo in the show notes there.
The notes, because that was
my notes.
Okay, so tell us what you're.
No, you got it right. It just the I think the last with is to take or withhold. Something that would have benefited, that benefited or would have benefited another. And I think that's where their period was at the end of it.
And there was a ton of applications, and even people raising their hands saying, like, what's been stolen from you? And, passport, life support. I thought that was a good one.
My kids are requiring me to go get some hearing tests. Apparently wasn't even close there. So
no, but all the different things that you can think of. Someone said in first service, I think love. If you think about all those things, and it really does add another layer to it, kind of like we've been peeling the onion back on each of these, finding like, a little bit, we can take it at the face value, but there's always something underneath.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things that you are kind of alluding to, and I think it's kind of important for people to realize, I think that there's a scripture that talks about that if you've broken one of the commandments, you've broken all the commandments. Yeah. And I think that when you start looking at the commandments, you can see, you kind of say, well, stealing and murder is the same thing. Well, yes, It is, but God needed to be a little bit more specific because as human beings, we tend to get very nitpicky with, stealing is only stealing if this, that, or, and technically we get into the technicalities of it, but it becomes a lot easier to understand how stealing can actually be breaking each of the other commandments, that there's an aspect to it. Having another God would be stealing the honor that's due God.
That's due him.
Taking God's name in vain is stealing God's reputation. Having idols is stealing God's identity. Failing to observe the Sabbath is stealing from God, in the sense that you're stealing rest that you could be experiencing. Not honoring your parents is stealing the honor that's due to them. Murder, obviously, it's stealing someone else's life. Adultery, that's stealing something that belongs to another person. And so, yeah. So, so you can kind of see
you go all the way down to coveting. It's the same.
So there's an aspect of it in all of it, really.
I think selfishness, I think that's why Jesus was able to boil it down so easily for us, in terms of you either love yourself or you love the person who created you. And Jesus said it pretty easily, right? Because it's just that simple. And I think the nuances to these things, and that's why I'm really grateful for your sermon this week, Ken, because, who would have thought you could break a sermon from stealing into an aspect of addition? That's really the beauty of this, is that what are you spending time on? Are you spending time creating ways to steal? I actually get amazed that there are so many people out there that are trying to figure out ways to separate you from your money by scams or whatever. It's like, if they spent half the time that they spend on these ideas just working, they probably be just as, yeah, exactly. But to be able to figure out ways to add to my neighbor's life, figure out those kind of things.
I kind of thought about it in a different way too. What you said, about loving yourself is, I wonder how, when we look at this, Ken mentioned that if the greatest of these commitments are love, wouldn't it stand to reason then that the most important thing that maybe we could offer somebody else or maybe ourselves is love? That without that part of ourselves maybe in tune with what we think it could be, what it should be, or what we see, or what we think we see in others that seem to be comfortable in their skin, and yet so many of us struggle inside with who we are, and we really struggle with just our own identity. We have horrible self-talk. We have horrible, thoughts about who we are and what we are, what we've done. We tend to beat ourselves up. And maybe that's the one for me, as I listened to the message in person twice this week, was really that how can I think about this and not stealing from someone else or even stealing from God when I steal from myself like every minute of every day? And I've never really put it in that context before, but this is maybe something, or at least for me, it was something that said, you got to look at yourself and get, somehow with God, you have to get your mind right about who he created you to be and who you are, and the gifts that you mentioned, the gifts that you have and the stuff. But so much of that stuff is stuff that God has given us in ourselves and our talents. And I'm just like, there's days when you just feel horrible, or, sometimes it's weeks or months, or someone, dealing with depression. How do we help somebody who goes, I don't even really like myself that much? How am I not going to steal all the time? Because this is like my default position, because I don't know where else to go. And that's where I've been sitting since Sabbath on this, is that it's really looking internally at the mess that I am inside and wondering, how in the world can I possibly just put this one up with whatever else? Because like Ken, he said, do you steal? I steal, and just I don't want to raise my hand either, but I do. I do it to myself. And then when I go, but I treated Jeff better than I treated myself, but I still treated Jeff like dirt. That's not an upgrade, really, right?
Yeah, and we say, love somebody, or do unto others as you would have done unto yourself, and you go, well, I'm not really treating myself all that great.
Exactly.
And so does that really work out, saying it that way, especially in the context of how, some of the worst things we say are the things we say to ourselves. Yeah. Right? So I do think that, though, it's a perspective piece that is my perspective here. Am I here to protect myself? And that a lot of times is where it ends up, is that I don't like myself, so I need to protect myself, or I don't feel good about myself, so I need to hide, or I need to, watch my vulnerability, and I need to, stay concealed, and all those kind of things that tend to protect, as opposed to God saying, hey, no, let me take care of that piece for you, and let me be the one that guards that side of you. So it is a second place piece.
How do you give that piece, especially maybe if you realize that maybe my internal self-talk isn't really good, and I tend to take the self-deprecating humor too seriously to myself, and I really mean it. And how do I approach God about that? And what do you ask for? Because it almost asks for, make me less mean, make me cool. Yeah, it almost seems like you're asking for something that maybe you're not supposed to have. Maybe this is just who I am. And that is that okay? Or do we, well, yeah, maybe I'm just, what I do to myself. A lot of times I'm like, man, if I was somebody else and I talked to them the way I just talk to myself, I would just avoid me at all costs.
I mean, everybody's different, and everybody's got, some people act in and some people act out. But most of the time, the reason if you're saying I'm just a mean person, a lot of times we are mean to ourselves, or we say things about ourselves that are bad because we want to beat other people to it. Because,
there you go.
It feels better if I say it first.
Okay. Well, what if I'm ill? I mean, what if I just feel like I'm ill-equipped to, if you're not good at it, you're basically you're trying to learn a skill that you don't know. And, we've been told since we were this high that God loves you no matter what you do. Ken tells us every week, family, God loves you. I love you. We're a family. We all have our ups and downs. And how was your week? It's okay if your week wasn't great. And, but if you keep at the same thing over and over again, that never seems to move on in your struggle. Because I think if we can't do it for ourselves, I mean, really, what's to fall out to our other relationships? You mentioned, Ken, in your sermon about how, well, that person at work, they don't deserve this. I'll withhold, something that maybe could have gotten them a promotion or a good job from the boss because I withheld something. I just didn't say it, so it's not too bad. Or, all these things. And I think, how far do we know it with ourselves, but do we always realize how far it goes into our family, into our friends? And hopefully they'll tell us when that happens. But, there's a lot of people that aren't very good about doing that either. They'll just kind of lay back and go, wow, he's just having a bad day. And then wow, when he has a good day, they're like, wow, he's having a good day. That's almost a surprise. And I wonder how much we steal from those relationships without even realizing it. This part's really, I don't know why, but it's really been sticking with me since the message and kind of bothering me. And I mean, I'm far from perfect, and I'm sure I've made plenty of people upset and not said the right thing. And I know what my internal talk is like. And, that's something I inherited from the way, my dad is the same way. And it's a thing that I don't like about myself. It's a thing that I constantly pray about and try to work on. But at the same time, another 5 years goes by and you're like, well, maybe I'm a little bit better than I was before. But do I really feel like or maybe this is just something that you're going to struggle with forever. It just feels like there's a lot of what Ken was talking about of stealing. It just seems like they come through just our own feelings of where we're not connected with God. And, some days it's some days it's better and some days it's not. And maybe not everyone struggles with this in the same way too. I don't know.
But maybe it's okay.
Maybe. I mean, is it okay? Right? Is it?
I think so. I think, I don't know. The closest thing I can as far as metaphors go, I was actually one of the shorter people in my class growing up.
Did you grow up in Canaan? You're pretty tall.
I am now. I grew about 10 inches in 1 year.
What?
But that it happened pretty quickly. But up to that point, it didn't feel like it was ever going to happen. And I guess what I'd say, Randy, is I think that some of us really do struggle with things. We give it to God. We ask Him to change us. We want to change, and it doesn't change. And so we have that negative self-talk that, maybe we're, God doesn't care about us, or maybe we're already too far gone for God, or something along those lines. And what God's really trying to tell us is, you know what? My grace is sufficient for your imperfection, which means that sometimes I think God wants us, I think that sometimes God allows things to stay in our life to remind us how much we need Him and how much we need His grace. And when we engage in that negative self-talk that I'm no good, I'm terrible, I think we sometimes ignore the growth that God has had in our life. And perhaps it wasn't in the area that you were asking for, but perhaps it was in an area that you needed more than what you were asking for. I think sometimes we don't know the good gift to ask for. We think we know what the good gift is. We think we know what God needs to give us, so we ask for it. And God says, you know what, that isn't, maybe that is an issue, but that's not the first issue that needs to be worked on. The first issue that needs to be worked on is this over here. And so my encouragement to anybody who's kind of feeling the way that you are, you see yourself stealing from yourself, you feel negative self-talk and things like that, is recognize that you will grow when God is ready for you to grow. And if you don't grow, but you've been turning it over to God, God's grace is sufficient. It's sufficient for you where you're at and what's going on. I think some people take that to extreme where they're like, you know what, I'm really not going to turn anything over to God. I'm just going to go ahead and do what I want to do, and His grace will be sufficient. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is when you pray about it, when you hand it over to God and you say, this is yours, do with it what you want, when you want, how you want, and I will rest in your perfection, not mine. That's what I think really we've got to do, and we've got to start telling ourselves that when we aren't exactly the way we want to be, we go ahead and analyze it, look at it, but don't beat ourselves up over it and say, look, I've turned it over to God. I've made another mistake. I'll give it to God again. I'll go ahead and do my honest part. And if it still doesn't go away, then God must have some reason for letting it remain there. But to me, it's one of those things. You can want to grow as much as you want to grow, but until your genetics kick in, or whatever's going to kick in, it is what it is. And yet, for some reason, we think in our spiritual life that it's different than the life, our physical life, or the life of plants. You cannot make something grow. It grows because God allows it to grow. It grows because it's the right season for it to grow. It grows because it's being nurtured in the right way. But no plant makes itself grow. I mean, that's when we talk about fruit of the Spirit. You don't see. I was at a concert many, many years ago with a group that's called The Cry, it's spelled K-R-Y, and I think the lead singer in that group said the illustration it's always stuck with me. He said, you don't see apple trees trying to produce fruit. You don't hear, I'm going to make that apple happen. You don't see that. Apple trees produce apples because they're apple trees, and when the season is right, when everything has come together, they produce apples. That's what they do. It's not forced. It's a part of their being. In the same way, we produce spiritual fruit the same way. We produce it in due season when the time is right, and God has the elements in line. And our job is just simply to keep ourselves in alignment with the Creator, to keep ourselves in alignment with Him and allow Him to change our thieving, to change our murdering, to change the adultery in our lives, to change all those things. And that's, again, that's not a license to go and steal from people. That's not any of that. But it is to say that I just know people who have struggled with various issues in their life, and they feel like God doesn't love them and care for them because they've asked for a good thing in Jesus' name and they haven't received it. And they can't understand what's gone wrong. And my encouragement to all those people is just hang in there. God's not done with you. And if you've been asking God for forgiveness and you've been asking God to help change you, trust Him.
Yeah.
Trust Him that that He's with you on that journey.
I think the part that gets frustrating is especially when it's one of those that I love my dad without question, but it's one of the things that it's one of those that you just want gone. Like I don't ever want this to be, so maybe expectations are a little too high, too fast, but it's one of those things that it might be one of the bigger things that you really wished were just not what you default to. And it's like you go to a state of mind where you just don't think for a moment, where you lose your concentration, you lose your thought process about, no, this is cool, this is good. And then you add being a perfectionist on top of it. And you're like the rat on the wheel chasing the perfection. And when it doesn't happen, which it isn't going to happen, then it's this vicious cycle. And so it's one I thought about this week a lot, just for the fact that a lot of people will say that, there's one thing, if you could change one thing about yourself, what would it be? And that absolutely, I think 1,000%, that would be what I would just be like, if you could just take one and just wipe that one away and we don't have to deal with it anymore. But I like that analogy though, until it's ready and until God's ready, just keep moving and keep praying and keep thinking good thoughts when you can. Are there any exercises, Jeff? Is this why people do hot yoga? They go and sweat it out and get it out, or I don't know.
Well, language is, that's the first thing you do is you try to figure out, what am I saying? What are the words that I'm using that are hurting, and what are the words that I'm using that are helping? And, you create better words, you create a better language for yourself. And so you're constantly, what Ken was just saying here is that, you have seasons in your life. You look back at your life and you think, well, where did I get that language from?
Yeah.
Because those weren't your words. They were brought from probably somebody else, or you said generations here. You've got generations that you're talking about. And so I think people need to pay attention. First of all, before they start looking at their perspective and maybe even the values and focus, but they need to pay attention. What language what's the language? Whose voice is this? Yeah. Is this my voice? Is this a voice that I've adopted and I've learned? Or is this God's voice? And I think that's what he's trying to say to us, is literally saying, please trust me. Trust that I can take care of this in due time. This is my thing to work on with you.
It's so odd because a lot of times it's, the words, where they came from, and you don't even believe them. Like, I don't even believe it's true most of the time. It's just a habit. It's a knee-jerk reaction to things. And I hated it as a kid, of course. But looking back on it, I go, wow, my dad grew a ton from where, his dad was and others. And you go, okay, there is, when you put the long stake in the ground and you look back and go, yeah, but if you hold the mirror up underneath your nose and you don't see anything coming out, you wonder, am I really working at this, or am I praying the right thing? Am I as earnest as I think I am? It feels like it, but maybe I'm not. But I look back and I see the relationship I have with my dad now, and he's one of my favorite people. And when we work on projects together, my wife is always like, oh boy, girls, stay out of the garage. Daddy and Rand and Grandpa are out in the garage, just stay out of the garage. Just stay out of the garage. And yet, we work really well together now. And I find myself, when he does it to himself, it's probably wrong, but I laugh. And I go, why can't I be that lighthearted about it myself? When I do go, well, there you go. Should have picked a better word. You should have, thought about this. And it just, Anyway, if you're one of these like
This
me,
is
that's-
Randy's therapy right
this
here.
has been my therapy session today. Honestly, it really has. So,
Jeff is going to send you a bill.
I know he's like, let's see, that's 25 minutes times. No.
Hey, but I want to go back to what I really appreciated the message Ken spoke about, and it goes to what you're saying, is that whenever we think about scarcity in our lives, we're going to constantly be thinking about what do I need? What do I need to get? What do I need to take? But if we change that focus, if we moved it away from our own scarcity or our own lacking or our own way of hiding or figuring out something that we're deficient in our lives, then we're going to miss the beauty of this. And that is, what do I have that I can add to someone else? And, when I'm constantly wondering about what I need and my own greed, then I'm going to miss this. And that's the part I think that's helpful in this commitment, is that we get a chance. God gives us all talents. We get a chance to add to people's lives. And that's the part that I think is so key in the sermon that I got from Ken here, is that why are we wasting so much time trying to fill voids that God takes care of?
Yeah, that's true.
When we could be looking at things that God's already given to us that can add to people's lives, which I think is a really beautiful way of looking at it.
And it's so much.
Thank you, Ken.
It's so much more. It's so much more fun, empowering, and just uplifting when you do that for somebody else. If I hear somebody else, like if my wife has the bad self-talk, I'm like, hey, what are you doing? No, come on, you don't believe that, and I'll give her the pep talk, and I'm like, and then she'll look at me like, you probably do it worse than anybody, but yet it feels so good to find yourself in that uplifting of someone else. And when you see the look on their face when they know that you really believe what you're saying, that's a huge uplift. And that's where it really hit me hard, was because when you, like you said, when you do, or when you're able to do that for someone, it feels so good, and it almost erases where you've just been, and it kind of leaves you on a real high of just of loving somebody else and making their day better, or just maybe changing their perspective, even if it's only for a little bit of time. I'm glad you brought that back up, and that you focused on that, because that's something we shouldn't miss, obviously.
Hey, Jeff, have you heard of positive intelligence? It's written by a guy named Shirzad Chamine.
We're sorry, Mr. Charning, if that's not the way you pronounce it.
Yeah, if I mess that up, I do apologize. And I feel quite certain I did.
He went for it, though. I like it.
Yeah, you got to go for it. I learned to do that with gusto when I did news. But basically, Shirzad basically argues that we all have these saboteurs in our life that are these inner voices, and I think he has 9 of them. These 9 inner voices that sabotage us. And for some people, it's hyperachievement. For other people, it's the judge, and for other people, it's the pleaser, and for other people, it's the victim. And so we all have these negative voices that are actually trying to steal from us. That's what a saboteur does, really. It sabotages, it steals from a person. And we have these negative voices. And by the way, if you're wanting to find out what your negative voices are, I think it's positiveintelligence.org. You can go there. There's a free test you can take, and it'll tell you what your
find your saboteur.
What your saboteurs are in your life. And I think that what's interesting about it, and I haven't gone through all his stuff, but I just took the test recently because I thought it was interesting. But I thought what's been interesting for me in having taken that test and kind of identified, firstly, they nailed mine to the ground. I got down. I said, yeah, that's me. That's exactly the things that are sabotaging me. And one of mine is I'm a pleaser by nature. I want people to be happy, and I want people to more important than them be happy is that they're happy with me. And that's not a positive thing, right? We think that that's a nice thing, and we love it in retail. We like it when somebody, when we're a guest somewhere, when somebody treats us like that. But the problem is that oftentimes for personalities like mine, it's very easy for us to be more addicted to making other people so that we're not uncomfortable than actually making other people happy because we genuinely care about them and want what's good for them, even if it makes me uncomfortable.
That's a thin line right there.
Isn't it?
Ooh.
But again, if we're
Ooh.
going with the whole thesis that addition is better than subtraction,
Yeah.
one of the things that's been helpful to me and in thinking about this is, as I'm reacting to life, to be able to identify, ooh, that's Ken jumping into pleaser mode. What's he trying? Am I really trying to make Jeff's life better by what I'm doing? Or am I trying to make my life better by making his life better? And there can be a big difference in that. And so when I'm practicing addition is better than subtraction, addition is better when I'm actually making someone else's life better, not just simply trying to make my life better. And so, again, for me, what's been useful is just being able to visualize that and to say, okay, for me, I always imagine Lumiere, the candle from Beauty and the Beast, the Be Our Guest. That's to me the epitome of the pleaser person. I just kind of imagine Lumiere going, "Oh, Ken, please make them happy," And so I kind of try to for me just visualize. Yeah, I want this person to be happy, but what I want to make sure is that I'm actually doing it for the right reasons in the right way, and that's an important thing. And if whatever it is that is your inner voice that's sabotaging you, that's stealing from you, if you can identify it, as that saying goes, if you can name it, you can tame it. And so if you can name those voices that are speaking, it can go a long way, those things that are stealing from you. And they're not just stealing from you. Those things are actually stealing from the people around you. Your closest relationships always suffer. My wife suffers because I'm a pleaser. It's not good because the fact of the matter is I cannot please everybody. I cannot please her. I can't please all the staff. I have to go ahead and determine what the best thing is and recognize that not everybody's always going to be happy, and that's okay. And so whatever the saboteur is out there, he's telling you lies that are stealing from you. I suppose that'll kind of move into a little bit of Anderlene's sermon this next week when she's talking about not bearing false witness.
Well, I like that because, everyone has something that they're dealing with. And this one, again, it's been one, this is something I've known, for a long time, but this one just really hit me this week as something that I really wish I had a better grasp on more often than I do. And it's just like you said, it's there, but am I in this mode? Am I crossing over for this? Was this legitimate? Cause man, and there's times it's deserved. It's like, man, I really tried to take a shortcut there and I know better. And it just bit me. And now I'm mad because I took this shortcut. So like knowing when to be constructive criticism and when to just be hard on yourself. But, as we start to wrap everything up, I just thought about what everyone else, you look and you think, oh, that person, they don't have that, they don't have this problem. They don't have that problem. Or what you think their personalities are. And I just, if you're listening today and just thinking about, oh, well, this is mine. And you're thinking about it. And that, like Ken said, there's the season, continue praying. And I like it too. There's when you find someone that you can pray with, whether that's your spouse and I know my spouse prays for me. I know if there's one person in the world that prays for me every day other than my wife, I know it's my mom. It's the reason I'm still alive and reason I'm still here is that she never gives up. And it's huge when someone else is praying for the same thing and praying in tandem and uplifting you in that manner. So if you have someone that can do that for you as well, that is a really, really good feeling. All right. Next week, it's got to be getting close. It means it's number 9. Oh, wait a minute. You just said it. Anderlene is next.
Yeah.
And she's doing
Don't Bear False Witness. Yeah.
Ooh.
My daughter's graduating this weekend.
Oh,
and
that's
so,
why you're gone.
yeah,
Okay,
my family's in town and there's a special Saturday service for graduates in the morning that I'm going to go and celebrate with my daughter and my family. And
a Saturday morning, not
the graduation. The graduation
Nice.
is Saturday night, but they have a kind of a dedication. I think they call it a baccalaureate service at 11 o'clock at another church here in the area. And so we'll go up there and and be a part of that. And fortunately, we've got Anderline, who's going to it's her first time preaching here, so we'll look forward to that. And she'll actually be joining you on the podcast next week.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
We're going to go ahead and take a little vacation time. It's this summer is just crazy. My kids both are working at summer camp. Of course, they couldn't figure out how to work at the same one. So Kyle is at Colaqua and Eric's up at Nasoka Pines Ranch in South Carolina, which is actually the summer camp I grew up working at.
Really?
So yeah. So anyway,
all right. The conversation continues on for another 15 minutes after this. And so rather than making this a really long episode, and for those that may not be interested to know what's upcoming right now, this is the end of the episode. Thank you guys so much. I hope you enjoyed today's show. And again, anything that we didn't say, could have said, should have said, 407-965-1607, or as always, podcast at wholelife.church. And we would be happy to take your questions, comments, and your feedback, or just your hellos. Send a voicemail and we'll play it on the next podcast. And so if you are interested in what's happening, hang on until Friday afternoon, evening, and the rest of the conversation that we were just getting into before I cut to myself was what is upcoming. This is going to take us from spring into summer and then even out as far as fall. And there's some really, really cool things that are upcoming here at WholeLife Church as far as what we're going to be doing for messages and themes. And these are some really, really great things, even outside of Saturdays, that we are hoping you will want to invite your friends, your families, your coworkers, your neighbors, whoever, to enjoy what we have planned for you all together as a family. So hopefully we'll see you guys all back on Friday for that special bonus episode. But in the meantime, as always, thank you for listening and have a great week.